We're going to call the meeting to order. Roll call.
Ms. Nyman. Here. Mrs. Scott.
Here.
Mr. Brad Updegrove.
Here.
Mr. Roger Updegrove.
Here.
Mr. Zawada.
Here.
Mr. Brophy.
Here.
Ms. Deeroff.
Present.
Mrs. Kratz.
Here.
Mr. Pinarello.
Here.
All present.
Please stand for a pledge of allegiance and a moment of silence. Pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Public comment period number 1. Mr. Savage.
Good evening, everyone. I first wanted to commend you all on these meetings and how they're set up for discussion. It seems like after 4 or 5 years, this is great to see these coming so much, and the presentations I look forward to, and I look forward to some good discussion. Given the timing, I'm guessing I have Dr. David Heiser to thank you for that, so thank you very much. And my question on policy is, as you talk about policy 006, I would like you also to think about the related policy on public participation and consider again the opportunity for people to sign up when they arrive at the meeting. People like me know we have to sign up ahead of time, but I have seen people come here hoping to speak and realizing what they get when they get here, they're not regulars, that they can't speak and they're disappointed. So I think there's a way around the concern that you had about people coming from outside of our district to speak, and that is just to have a checkbox on the sign up that says, I certify that I am a member of this community, however it's defined in your policy. And if they don't check the box, ask them that question here. You don't have to ask them where they live. You just have to ask them to certify. If they lie, they lie. What's there to lose, right? Okay, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Takes us down to our presentation and discussion section for this evening. And just a reminder to our board members for this discussionary period, please make sure you tap on the touchpad, draw your microphone close enough to you so folks in here in the audience can hear, as well as anybody that is watching the stream this evening. It really does help in terms of the sound purposes. So we're going to begin. We have this meeting broken sort of in half, and a part of it's going to be both for policy we're going to begin, and the back end of the meeting a facilities update. So we're going to begin with a review of policy 815.1, which is the use of generative artificial intelligence in education. And it also includes this evening a AI presentation from our Director of Technology, Mr. Dave Feit, and from our Director of the Office of Teaching and Learning, Mrs. Stephanie Landis. So I welcome them to the podium to begin their presentation. For board members, you should have inside your handouts this evening, I believe, a copy of 815.1. You also have some facts and figures regarding COPA, and you'll hear a little bit more about that. And you also have a hard copy of the presentation that we're displaying here on the screen, and which should be on the stream as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Landis and Mr. Feit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As we go through this, in the copy of the policy that you have in front of you, we did highlight some certain sections. That doesn't mean that those are the only parts of the policy that we would hope that the board would decide to include, but rather just some areas that we wanted to highlight for further discussion this evening. We know it's a lot and it might be difficult to follow along with all the slide numbers tonight, so that's why we wanted you to have all of this to be able to reflect on and look at after the presentation as well, if you wish to. The first two slides that I have here are just an example for you in the event that you maybe haven't used AI yourself before, at least intentionally. AI is certainly all around us now. All you have to do is search for something on the internet and it immediately gives you an AI-generated response to start with. This is just one example. This is using an AI tool called ChatGPT, where I simply typed in some directions and said, please give me a 2-paragraph overview of the history of artificial intelligence written on a 6th grade reading level. And this slide and the one that comes right after it is what ChatGPT gave me. These tools can be beneficial. For example, if I decided that this was maybe on too high of a reading level for my audience, I might say, please rewrite these 2 paragraphs on a 3rd grade reading level, and it would very quickly give me 2 paragraphs using some different vocabulary and terms that would be on that lower level. So all kinds of things that can be done with artificial intelligence. We're going to share with you tonight some of the benefits as well as some of the concerns and how we hope to address them here in Boyertown, and get your input on a potential policy to help us do just that. There are several things that we already have in place in the district when it comes to safety and security measures for our students with our data. Mr. Feight's going to speak to that a little bit and explain the things that you see on this next slide, as well as talk to you a little bit about the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, which I believe you have a copy of some information in front of you regarding that as well.
Thank you. So one of the things that we always do with regard to our protection of our students while they experience internet here at the school district is to ensure that we have what we call a single sign-on method of authentication for the student. That makes sure that no student enters private data themselves. We contain the data that the app or the application or the website uses through our Clever instance, which allows the student to not have to create an account, create a password, or submit any personal data. The data that is submitted is already vetted by the school district and secured on our own side. That is what we look at when we evaluate any piece of software, any application as used by a student or teacher in the classroom, and any future application or instance such as artificial intelligence as we move forward. We also have a program called Securely, which is something that the teachers can use to monitor our secondary education students, our 8 through 12 students, to make sure they are directing the students to the proper avenues when they are using the technology in their school. Google Apps, we also have an agreement with Google and our Google instance where, again, we are protected through COPA and FERPA to make sure that we are only providing the appropriate student data through any instance that also ties into our Google app. The program Clever, which you see there in parentheses, is the instance that we use to single sign-on. So that is the device that we use to make sure that the student data is secure and the application does not access anything that they should not access.
In terms of district involvement in artificial intelligence up until the present time, we've been doing a lot to try to educate ourselves and in turn help to ensure that our students and our staff are prepared for whatever future artificial intelligence might include. So last year, the Berks County Intermediate Unit had a leadership series. This series met 3 times throughout the year up at Kutztown University, and it was open to school districts throughout Berks County. So we had sent a team, along with many other districts across the county, to participate in this leadership series. It was led by a well-known educational leader, A.J. Giuliani, who has been to Boyertown in the past and presented at some of our conferences several years ago. And he led us through several different trainings to help us learn more about artificial intelligence, as well as what are some positive ways that it could be useful to our educators. So we participated in that last school year. As part of that, administrators have to, every 5 years, get what's called Act 45 credits, much like teachers have to get Act 48 professional learning credits. So this was something that administrators could earn Act 45 credits for participating in. And along with that, there was some assignments that were required, one of them being an action plan creation. So I had done it for Act 45 credit. So I had worked on an action plan draft, which I had shared with Mrs. Torsha last year, and it was basically just some of the different steps that we needed to take take as we were looking at different things around AI. And one of the things on that action plan was the idea that we needed at some point to have a policy as a district in terms of how we would utilize or not utilize artificial intelligence here in Boyertown. We also have professional learning communities that our teachers participate in, and our instructional coaches are often a part of with them, and they help to educate the teachers around some things with artificial intelligence as well. The BCIU also has an AI network that meets in person as well as virtually a couple times a year. Again, with a focus on education around different AI components. So we have a number of us here in Boyertown who have been part of that AI network, again, to collaborate with other districts around the county and with the intermediate unit around that topic. We've also engaged in staff conversations, some specific to AI, some not yet specific to AI. That first piece that you see on this next slide has to do with professional ethics training. That is one of the newer state mandates and something that we have participated in. Mr. Hahn led professional ethics training. He's run it twice this year for our professional staff. And one of the things that we are talking about doing is having Mr. Fight alongside of Mr. Hahn provide that training in the future so that we can really embed that AI in ethics component as well in that presentation so that all of our staff are hearing that information. Part of our regular teacher evaluation process also involves personal integrity, which is one of the pieces that the policy we're going to look at tonight speaks to. We use something called the Danielson framework for our evaluation process for our professional staff, and the fourth domain of that includes a piece on demonstrating professionalism, which comes along with appropriate use of technology in the classroom. And then another piece of technology work that we have been doing this year has been testing our systems. I'll let Mr. Fight talk a little bit about what that looks like.
So as if with any increase in technology, as you know, we continually try and make sure that we are educating our staff on not only the proper ways to use it in the education field, but also the security field, making sure that the staff is well aware of all the pitfalls that may go into accessing online information. Our staff is now receiving regular email testing to make sure that we are preventing any phishing attempts and any ransomware attacks on our systems by educating the end user, who is the keeper of the portal, you might say, as with their user account and password, and trying to make sure that we are keeping them as secure as possible to identify attempted attacks through an AI phishing attempt or any other ransomware attack that may come to the district. That'll be tied into our professional ethics training that will be ongoing yearly, and I'll be integrating a piece of technology ethics to that presentation that Mr. Hahn has already been giving.
In front of you, you have a copy of the sample policy, which is the PSBA policy 815.1. We'd like to go through some of the key components with you this evening and have opportunity to have some conversation and discussion with you around those. Again, it might be a lot of flipping to look at the slide numbers on there right now, but hopefully it will help you as you go back through and look at this in a little bit more detail in the future as well. The first page of the policy is really just setting that purpose and who has the authority. You'll see that it notes on that first page the COPA, that Child Online Privacy Protection Act, as well as FERPA, which is another federal privacy act that prevents us from sharing student information outside of those who need to know the information and so on. So the first page just really provides that background and talks about those pieces. But some of the things that we want to point out to you that are included in this policy that we think are really positive things as you consider whether you want to move this forward. And that is, it talks about generative AI tools and resources used in district schools and programs shall be evaluated and authorized on an ongoing basis. And it's looking at several things: age appropriateness for our students, bias, making sure that any resources being used do not have a bias to them, privacy protections, as Mr. Fight alluded to, accessibility standards, and those data security pieces. One of the things that we have to determine if we are to put this policy forward is On the second page, you'll see numbered 1 through 7. We need to determine who we want the people to be to evaluate and authorize those resources on an ongoing basis. We would recommend that the director of IT and the director of OTL should both be checked off there where it says Director of Curriculum and Instruction. That would be our Director of Office of Teaching and Learning. That both of us or both people in these roles would need to really have the opportunity to look at those resources, both from that data security and safety and privacy protection angle, as well as from the age appropriateness and the bias and how is it used to support our students academically. As well as with determining appropriate AI resources, it also mentions in here that the board directs that only district authorized generative AI tools and resources may be used on district computers and in district schools and programs. We're really looking at that for students. That's kind of towards the bottom of the second page there where we have it highlighted. Really focusing for students that there would be district authorized tools that they would be limited to using when it comes to artificial intelligence. We've looked at a couple different things. We're going to talk about this in a little bit more detail on one of the upcoming slides in terms of what generative AI tools are out there that can work within the parameters of our safety and security systems when it comes to student privacy of data and so on. In addition to that, one thing that we would recommend that we think would be beneficial would be to have an AR or an administrative regulation to go along with this policy. AI is rapidly changing, as we all know, and there could be AI resources that we're not even aware of yet, or that even perhaps haven't even been created yet, that 6 months or a year from now, a teacher may be interested in using and want to propose that we take a look at to see if it would be appropriate or not for students to use within our schools. And we would want to have a process for teachers to bring those to our attention so that we can make sure that those resources are properly vetted and that we've had an opportunity to review them. So what we're envisioning is an AR that would look very similar to what the teachers are already familiar with and what they fill out when they're requesting a new book for a whole class novel or a lit circle book. They have a form that they fill out with certain questions that they answer to show that they have reviewed it first before they bring it to our attention, and then things that we look for as well. So looking for a similar process to review different materials when it comes to AI resources as well. So that's one recommendation that we would make. Mr. Feight's going to speak a little bit about investigating AI resources. There's some things that we have been looking at, again, really looking at that safety and security angle in terms of how we can direct students to things that would be safe for them to use. AI is not going anywhere, and so it's really important that we teach students and educate them of the benefits as well as the pitfalls and how they can use it safely.
Mrs. Landis and I have had ongoing conversations with multiple school districts, not only in the Berks County area, but also in Montgomery and Lehigh counties, as we have been trying to investigate the proper course of action. One of the things that we are trying to make sure that we can do is provide the teachers an avenue where the students can remain in their lane, can remain within guardrails of using AI, so that we have some sort of reliance on where those students are going. And in particularly on my end of it, making sure that they're accessing it securely and safely. So we have been looking at a variety of different resources that would be student resources only, as the teachers will be allowed to peruse and browse as they see fit. The students will be guided using special guardrails to make sure they're using applications that the district has already vetted, not only from an educational standpoint with the Office of OTL, but from a security standpoint from my office, to making sure that student data is protected, that we might have a DPA, a data privacy agreement with the vendor, to make sure that we are providing the student the safest and most educationally reliant avenue using AI. So those are things that we're going to continue to investigate, not only internally here in Boyertown, but across multiple school districts in Berks, Montgomery, and Lehigh counties. The one thing I do want to make mention at this time, there would probably be a cost associated with those guardrails, making sure that we're using an application that would be relevant for them, making sure that it is meeting all the standards that we are going to come up with along with this policy. We don't have those figures in front of you today, but those would be things that we would be asking you down the road.
Yes, go ahead, Mrs. Nyman.
Do you have an estimate of what it might cost? I mean, I'm not holding you to it, just an idea.
Sure. One of the things that we would have to investigate very first internally would be where we open this up. Would this be a K through 12 initiative? Would this be a secondary initiative? Would this be starting in grades 4 and 5? There are arguments on both sides that we may not want to open those, that this application tool for all students, mainly because it may not be age appropriate and curriculum appropriate. One of the estimates that we have used that was used at the East Penn School District, which they are currently using right now, is a ballpark cost of about $7 per student in licensing fees for that kind of application.
And that's per year?
That would be a yearly cost, yes.
Along with this, one of the other things that the policy contains is AI literacy, which is on the 3rd page of the policy that you have in front of you. And AI literacy is really all about training and professionally developing all those who would come in contact with AI. So our professional staff, we would include training during our professional learning time on the use and as well as the ethical and legal implications of artificial intelligence. We would need to make sure we're providing training for students on expectations and appropriate use of resources. AI is not something that students would be using all the time. We want to make sure we are, continually encouraging our students to think for themselves. And there will be many, many times where they will be doing work where they will not be permitted to access AI. But part of the training is making sure that we have consistent guidance so that students are clear on when they are and are not allowed to use certain resources, and training for our staff on how to kind of put those parameters in place. And then our IT staff in the Information Technology Office would also need training regarding oversight and use of artificial intelligence. So those pieces are mentioned in the policy as well, and something that we agree is critically important. Academic integrity is a big piece of this and something that is also included in the draft policy that you have in front of you. This is over on page 4. And it talks in here about the use of generative AI by students to complete assignments or assessments shall only be allowed to the extent stated and outlined by the teacher for the individual assignment or course. So again, the teachers would need to make it abundantly clear to the students before they started working on something, if it is something that they are allowed to use AI resources for or not. And that would need to be clear to them, and students would need to certainly follow along with that direction provided by their teacher. It also talks about the board permits the use of AI detection tools as an aid to identify potential academic integrity issues, but prohibits reliance on results from AI detection tools as the sole determination of academic integrity. This is a piece we're going to talk about a little bit more in a future slide, and this is something for you to really consider as a board. Basically what this means here is there are companies out there that promote what they call AI detectors that claim that they can tell if a student copied something that they found somewhere else on the internet, copied something that AI generated for them, or if it's the student's own thoughts and own words. The problem is that these are not particularly well developed at this time. There are actually several lawsuits out there regarding these types of AI detection tools. At the present time, we would not recommend that the school district invest funds in purchasing any kind of an AI detector because they're not 100% accurate, and there are a lot of legalities still to be determined around those. So whether you wanted that statement to stay in there or not, so that if there were detection tools down the road that would be better equipped, that you have it already mentioned in the policy. But regardless of whether there are better detection tools out there or not, it really shouldn't be the sole determination of academic integrity. It really needs to involve a conversation between the teacher and the student. Asking them simple questions about, well, tell me more about that idea that you wrote about there, and seeing if they can expand on the things that they have written and really dig into conversation with the students. And that conferring piece is really important with that as well. But that integrity piece is something that we would definitely be stressing with our students in our classrooms, just as we would, in regard to cheating in other ways as well. There's also AI-generated content verification, and this is mentioned in the policy also. And this is kind of along similar lines to what we talked about on the previous slide. So it says in the policy, individuals using generative AI tools and resources have a responsibility to apply proper oversight and evaluation of generated information. Generative AI tools shall not be the sole determining factor used to make decisions related to student learning, assessment, academic integrity, or conduct. So, in other words, when we're making decisions about student learning, for example, perhaps we are looking at student data to determine what math course a student should be in for the following year. We would not rely solely on AI-generated information to make that determination. Currently, our students use a program called IXL that has reading and math skills that students can work on. They take a pre-test, it determines their levels, and then gives them individualized problems to work on and practice to do that's based on that assessment. So IXL, in a way, uses AI to help identify the level that a student is on and provide them those assignments. But that wouldn't be the only resource that we would use to determine what math needs a student has for their class the next year. We want to get input from the teacher. We want to look at other types of assessments that the student has participated in. So the policy speaks to that and says that we should not be using generative AI tools as the sole determining factor to make those types of decisions about a student's learning. The last thing that the policy talks about on the last page is consequences for inappropriate use, and talks about if a student fails to comply with policy or district rules regarding appropriate use of technology, including AI. We do have an acceptable use policy. Mr. Feit will speak to that in just a moment. But we would follow our appropriate disciplinary action and or referrals to legal authorities based on what we have in our discipline code. And we would expect that students and staff would report any violations or suspicious activity to the building principal if there was some sort of violation with AI. We do already have an acceptable use policy, and Mr. Feit's going to speak to that.
Yes, our existing acceptable use policy is something that is reviewed yearly by both our employees and our staff to remind them of the appropriate use of our district resources within our district network. All students are obligated to make sure that they do not in any way attempt to circumvent our network and our security by using the district device in a manner that was not outlined by the vision of the board and the school district appropriately. One of the things that we want to continue to mention as we try to develop this policy is this is a tool for the toolbox. This is something that is ever evolving. It's a very complicated tool, but it is nothing more than a single resource that the students will be using. We are not asking to rely upon AI for any data, such as Mrs. Landis mentioned, to promote students throughout their educational experience. We're also making sure that the students cannot only use AI-generated tools to develop their schoolwork and progress through the school district. We want to make sure that it's something that they are aware of because they will have exposure to it as adults and in their higher education or vocational expertise moving forward. But we want to make sure that we are creating guidelines that don't prohibit them from learning about it, but making sure they stay within the path intended for academic integrity and security.
Along with the consequences for inappropriate use, the policy also talks about users of generative AI being responsible for any damages to equipment or systems that would result from deliberate, malicious, or willful acts. or attempting to modify without permission or damage any kind of files or violate copyright law, things like that. So that would all be included in there as well. The last bullet notes that this policy should also apply to student conduct that occurs off school property or during non-school hours to the same extent as provided in board policy on student discipline. So it would align with other policies that you already have in place. And then we have a few recommendations that we would love to discuss with you further. First of all, we strongly believe that we do as a district need to get an AI policy in place, hopefully sooner rather than later. The challenge with this is the policy needs to be general enough to outlast the frequent changes and updates to AI that are happening in our world, so that you're not having to update the policy multiple times a year. However, at the same time, because AI does change so rapidly, it is a policy that you should probably look at least annually to see if there are any updates that need to be made as things change in the world of technology. We would recommend that the PSBA policy would be the recommended template that we take a look at. Again, as I mentioned before, we do not recommend purchasing an AI detector with district funds at the present time, as they really are not well designed at the present time, and there are still a lot of legalities to be determined surrounding those. On the next slide, we have a few more recommendations. A couple things to consider in the policy. One is the staff. Who should the staff be that are designated to oversee AI updates and address issues? There's two different places in the policy where that has to be noted at the beginning, and then again on, I think it's bottom of page 4 and top of page 5. Again, we would recommend that the director of IT and the director of OTL should both be looking at these things together, to look at it from both the technology lens as well as the educational academic lens. The consent piece, there is a place in the policy on page 2 where I have it crossed out in here for you in the middle where it says slide 17. It says the district shall obtain prior informed consent from parents/guardians before allowing a student to use generative AI tools and resources in school. It's important for parents to be aware of AI, and it's important for us to make sure that we are providing clear updates and information to our families. However, trying to gather publicity permissions from parents on an annual basis proves to be quite challenging when we're looking to get things from 6,500 plus students in our district. And again, AI is all around us. You literally go on a search tool on the internet and an AI generated response pops right up. So rather than the way it's worded in the policy, our suggestion would be that we as a district acknowledge on an annual basis and remind families that students do have access to AI tools in the district and would be using them within the parameters of the policy that's in place and within the parameters of the tools that are approved by the district. So that would be our recommendation for that piece. There's one other thing that I had crossed out on here for us to have discussion about, and that is on page 4. It says teachers shall outline use of generative AI tools and resources in their required lesson plans. At the present time, we do not have a district policy that requires teachers to hand in lesson plans on a regular basis or use a particular format. Our teachers do plan on a regular basis and they have things well prepared for their students, but they don't turn in lesson plans or have a set template that they're required to use. So unless that's something that the board decides to do differently in the future, that line there doesn't necessarily align with the policies that we currently have in place in the district. It does, again, right above that line is where it does state that parent or teachers need to clearly identify for students before an assignment or an assessment is given, whether AI may be used or not, and they need to have clear parameters around that. So it does cover that piece, that communication is there, that it's part of what the teachers are planning and communicating. But in terms of, having lesson plans that get turned in or that sort of thing, we don't currently have a policy that requires teachers to do that. So that's why I have that part noted that way. And then again, as Mr. Fite mentioned earlier, the AI resources that would be limited would be those ones for student use. The teachers would have a little bit more flexibility in terms of the resources that they are using. There's some great AI tools out there that can help teachers make slideshows and things like that that would be really beneficial to them, that we wouldn't necessarily have students use, but that would be beneficial tools for teachers to be able to have access to. And I think that is our last slide. Any questions, comments, items for further discussion on this topic? Mr. Zawada?
Okay, just a couple notes, and looking at it over the weekend, this is sort of like when we first got computers. Then we got cell phones. It exploded. We never got on top of it. My concern is, are we going to have enough people? Should this become a permanent committee, cabinet position? Because you are affecting 6,500 students. And like you said, we walk out of here tonight, we're already, something's passed us by. I mean, the AI generated stuff, I mean, you look at what Hollywood was demanding, they don't feel they need actors anymore. You know, we've got things from TikTok, you can see what they can do. But it scares me because, again, and we don't know, because again, this is like computers. You know, we don't know where the ramifications come, or where does it break even, so like you said, yearly reviews, I can see there would be monthly till we can do this. This is actually going to be something like, you know, it's curriculum, but it's actually the outer part of the curriculum. So personally, you know, like I said, I don't know if, you know, I don't want to be like the federal government and set up a committee for everything, and then it takes forever to, but after our prior discussions and some of that, you know, like I said, I mean, it's something we're living with. We're not going to get rid of it, but what's the best way we control it for our students? And it's the same thing. If the parents don't sign off on it, does that student, is he allowed or she allowed in the class to use it? Or, you know, or does that set up something legal because we didn't get it signed, and all of a sudden they get put into the wrong area and they're into something age appropriate, something that's not right? Does that leave the liability to the school? So do we enforce more so you know, making sure those permission slips or whatever are signed? Teachers stay on top of that. And I know, like you said, you're now going to have teachers turning in their, you know, their classes. And we're asking a lot of them, but we're also asking, what I'm saying is, I agree 100% with you. I don't want to see that person be a chat box, you know, sitting there with but I also said to you, I saw some different shows where it added, instead of a para, they were allowed to go into a certain area for their science class. So the teacher was allowed to walk around, and the students were allowed to ask certain questions, and they were getting answers, and then the teacher would oversee. I don't see that in every class or anything, but I know there's some classes where a little bit, you know, we're short teachers, so maybe we could use a para. I probably figure my 3-year-old grandson knows more about this than I do. So my concern is that we don't just sit on it every year, but, you know, make this a key issue for this, you know, for the next couple of years. So that's my opinion. I apologize for taking up that much time, but
No, that's okay.
it's scary, but at the same time, it opens up so many things for the kids, as well as the teachers, as well as hopefully for me, you know, down the road.
Yes, it's definitely something that will need to be revisited on a regular basis because, again, it is something that changes rapidly. We're definitely not looking at AI to replace our teachers. We have phenomenal teachers, and there are many, many things that a teacher can do that AI is not going to do for our students. And so our teachers play a very important role. AI is a tool. One of the things, I think we may have gone through the one slide a little bit quickly, but on the one slide we had a link for you that you can look at your leisure as well, that shows one of the tools that our instructional coaches have used to develop and create, that talks to students about the fact that AI is just that. It's a tool, and it's not meant to do all of the work for you. Even when you are using an AI resource, you still have to do your own thinking. The output that it gives you is only as good as the input that you put into it. So you need to know what kinds of questions to ask it and how to kind of tailor it and get down to the level of information that you're looking for it to produce. So, that's an important piece as well. And that integrity piece that we talked about also is critically important.
Yeah, and as you ask it more questions, it learns, and then the next thing you know, it's got that correct answer for the student. It can bring it back, or you bring it around. What's 2 and 2? Okay, 4. But then times this, time that, and next thing you know, you got a student that has all the answers but didn't use the thinking end of it. That's the scary part. And we kind of did that with computers in the beginning. It's why we banned cell phones in classrooms, because they were using it to get answers. So
it is amazing how much technology has changed even in the course of our careers. I don't think I even had a computer in my classroom my first 10 years of teaching, so it's definitely changed a lot, especially over the past 10 to 20 years. One point that you brought up that I think is important that we didn't necessarily touch on, that Mr. Fite can speak to a little bit more, that idea that when you put something into the AI generator, artificial intelligence then takes that information that you've put in there and uses it to improve itself and come up with better answers in the future. One of the benefits of the programs that we are looking at using is that it does not share our students' answers and information outside of the confines of that program. So I'll let Mr. Fite speak to that. He can explain it a little bit better than I can.
Right. Some of the tools that you've already mentioned actually are in development and have already been developed. One of the tools that we're looking at is called School AI, which actually provides a environment where the teacher and the student can interact using AI-generated questions and answers. And then there are tools within that application that can allow the teacher to make sure that the student is staying on track. For instance, we may provide a linear equation in math and allow the students to use AI to attempt to answer that question. And if the student gets off topic and asks a question that is not related to a linear equation, the actual AI tool will then snap into action and redirect the student back into where the prompt that they should be working from. These are the tools that are being developed. They're continually developed. We only have been looking at 2 thus far. There are probably far more than that across the United States that are being used by districts at this time. So it's something that we would continually evaluate, not just on a yearly basis, but on a monthly basis. That's why I think it is important that our recommendation is to tie an AR to this, so that we can regulate this policy without constantly having to meet and discuss the entire topic ad nauseum, making sure that we use it just like we use any app-based learning in our classrooms or software that teachers may discover to use down the road. Those are things that my staff continually look at, not only from a security standpoint, but from a practicality standpoint on whether or not it is meeting the curricular needs set by our Office of OTL.
Mrs. Nyman?
Yeah, I hope we're going to have more discussions like this before we make a decision on this, because I think it's really critical to really dig down into it. I do have some questions. In talking to some teachers I know, not necessarily Boyertown, but throughout Berks County, some Montgomery County, virtual programs. How are we going to control that with AI?
Could you be a little more specific on what, I'm not sure I understand.
Virtual programs, just say social studies. Mm-hmm. You give an assignment, you have to read a whole chapter or whatever, and you have to do this project. Mm-hmm. They can go on to AI and get all that information without doing the research themselves. Mm-hmm. And come up with, say you have to do a report. Mm-hmm. AI can do that report for them. How are we going to control that?
Correct. Well, that would be part of our ethics and our integrity discussions that we would have with not only the teachers but the students. But in terms of the tools themselves, we don't prohibit anything from a personal device. So those are some of the problems that we may incur whether we have a policy in place or not. The students have to know the correct and appropriate use of AI within their assignment field. What we will do is, when we develop an application that we believe fits the model that the policy hopefully outlines, those students will be directed towards that. There is nothing outside of our COPA and FERPA agreements that students can get to outside of our district resources. So it'll be about teaching our students the proper use of those resources that are permitted through our filtering and application restrictions that are put on district devices. So that's part of the way we'll guide the student to the proper use of AI. There is a component of this that is something that can't be done with technology. This has to be taught through basic common sense and learnings that the teachers and the students have to learn. What is the appropriate use of AI? I can go out and have AI write me a 600-page document and make me look like a nuclear physicist. That doesn't make me a nuclear physicist. So it's very important that we teach the students the proper use of technology, because we will not be able to restrict all uses of AI and technology from our students.
Okay, so I'm a student, and I'm on virtual, and I'm given the quarters or the semester or the years information of what I have to do for that course for that year. What's to say I couldn't have that done in a week's time, 2 weeks' time, by using AI? What will be done to that child, that student, to me, for using AI to do all my work and then not learning anything from it, handing in all my information, and now I can sit there for the rest of the year or semester or quarter or whatever it is and do nothing?
So you brought up a couple important points. One is the child's cheating themselves out of an education, right? And they're not learning anything. We can only control what happens within our virtual program. You know, we can't control what students are or aren't doing if they're in an outside virtual program. But within our BASD virtual program, we have our own teachers who are connected to students in those virtual programs and still work to build relationships with them and are taking a look at their work. So if they see something that's written by a student and it doesn't match the style of writing or the quality of writing that they're used to seeing from that student, that's where it initiates a conversation and a follow-up. And, you know, whether it's email or a phone call or a Zoom session or whatever, that they can be checked in with our teachers, or the Accelerate teachers who are working with them depending on the level that they're in. And also, even if they're in our virtual program, they're still BASD students, and so they would fall under the same guidelines of our acceptable use policy and our discipline policy, and those pieces would apply to them as well.
Okay, so I say, I didn't do that, and my parents say, nope, she didn't do that. What is going to be the teacher's recourse, and is administration going to back them up?
I think it would be the same as if that happened for an in-person student who didn't produce their own work and didn't, cheated on something. We would follow the same discipline policies, whether it's, earning a 0 on an assignment or having to redo an assignment or whatever has been established in that situation.
Okay.
And just to interject there, Mrs. Nyman, we have some of those things that are already taking place. They're not future things to look forward to. Those are things that are actually part of what we've been involved in, and I'm assuming Boyertown's been involved in even prior to me coming here. But in my short time here, we've been involved in some of those instances and have worked through codes of conduct and have worked through the different learning pieces that come with that. Due to the nature of students' access to the World Wide Web and how we try to develop students' understanding of appropriate use.
Okay, I guess my next question would be, whose word are you going to take? Are you going to take the student parents version? Or are you going to go by the teacher and support the teacher?
So we go by what the investigation leads us to. And that's an investigation using multiple folks that would involve teacher, administration, certainly hearing the student side, the parents involved in that, and make what we believe is the best decisions and the appropriateness based on whatever occurred. In terms of that, and there are endless types of accounts that can and will occur through time. So it's working through all of those things collectively to come to some type of resolution, some of which, fall within the disciplinary realm of things, some of which, have consequences of redoing some of the things in a nature to that fit the parameters for the assignment. So, those are all things that, our administrators and teachers are already working on, and we have to continue to develop our staff to be able to professionally develop them to prepare themselves for that. It's an added thing that's in the world in which educators now live.
Okay, one other comment, and then I'll stop for tonight. With regard to permission, I think that's something that should be done on a yearly basis, because what happens if you have separated, divorced parents and the child goes from this one to that one? How are we going to know that, okay, this time it was with mom, next time it's with dad? How are we going to control that?
This is not going to be any different than what we currently do as part of the annual verification for using district equipment. That is why it's important for us to explore avenues and tools that reflect our security and our data security policies. We would not suggest or recommend any application that did not confine to our current policy of using single sign-on and making sure that the student data is secure from our standpoint, so there would be no difference to the student using an AI tool versus a math software program that also integrates through Clever. We would make sure that all the applications that we research and develop with our teachers fit that policy as we currently use with any application or software we currently use in the district.
Okay, and I would just hope that we're getting our teachers' input from here.
Definitely. One other thing related to the last question that you had asked, when it comes to cheating and our students producing their own work. Oftentimes, especially when it comes to writing, the teachers are working with students through the writing process, and so it's not just hand in a final copy at the end. They have checklists that they're using along the way where students have different smaller chunks that they're doing, building up to that full complete writing piece at the end. Often revision and editing is part of that process, and students have to show the evidence of their thinking and their work all along the way. So those types of things also can help put some of those safeguards in place to make sure that students aren't just using AI to come up with a writing piece that they hand in at the very last minute.
First of all, what Mr. Zawada said, I think definitely reviewing this way more than once a year obviously would be very beneficial, especially at the beginning point. And also I saw in there something about bullying being used with AI. So maybe we could put something in there where, obviously we have a policy against bullying and we have AI procedures and policies. So if you bully with AI, you basically double down and the punishment would be that much worse, not just take it from here or there. Because I can imagine some AI bullying could get pretty awful. So I'd like to see, students really, hate to pay for doing things like that.
So our current bullying policy does also include cyberbullying. So that may be a policy that, you want to take a look at and review also to make sure that it covers AI, or if anything needs to be updated or revised there, that's considered.
I want to thank Mr. Fite, and I want to thank Mrs. Landis for a wonderful presentation and engaging the board this evening. Moving forward with this, our plan would be to modify the A15.1, putting in some of the recommendations that we you heard this evening, bring this back to you at the committee of the whole meeting in March. So you see that draft version, see the changes in some of the language. There could be more discussion with regard to that, and if any more modifications you'd like to see with regards to that can be made. We would then bring that forward at the legislative meeting, if the board so chooses, to vote for a first read on that. Remember, policies need 2 separate reads with regard to that. So we can then modify, make any changes, bring forward at the committee meeting in April for a second read at the legislative meeting in April, with the idea of having hopefully an approval of a board policy with regard to 815.1 sometime May, and certainly by the time we start the school year for 25-26. That is ultimately the goal here. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you both. Okay, that shifts us down to policy 006, and this is the meetings policy. This is your design policy of how meetings are conducted and all the capacities in regards to that. I've heard over my time period being here, and the reason I've brought forward this policy, a lot of commentary with regard to committees. Committees fall inside of 006. So I hope to engage the board this evening in any discussion and possibilities that the board was thinking in order to move forward a policy that the board could consent to in terms of its committee meeting structures. And I think there's been some discussion around some of those, what is or what is not committee meetings. And I want to really open the floor up for the board an opportunity to share any insights and some thinkings that they may have with regard to committees. And if you open that policy, the committee section falls on page 10 of the policy.
Hey, Dr. David Iser, me and you had a conversation prior to this about committees, and you had some ideas from other schools. I think maybe you could share that with the board and see what people think of that.
Sure. One of the things that I've seen so far, and again, truly Boyertown's not running committee meetings in a traditional sense, no really committees at all right now. So thinking this through a little bit in the terms of the structure of how your present meetings are now with your committee of the whole meetings and your legislative meetings, it'd be an opportunity prior to each of those meetings. And right now you have in name 4 established committees. One is policy, you have finance, you have education and student services, and facilities. So it'd be an opportunity, if you really think this through, to be able to offer an every other month opportunity to host 2 of those committees, 1 each prior to the committee of the whole meeting, 1 prior to a legislative meeting in any particular month, and then the following month host the other 2 committees prior to. Give an opportunity for each of the committees to meet probably 5 to 6 times a year, and really a good opportunity for us as a board then to sit down and to really target 1 or 2 agenda items that those committee leaders would like to engage in prior to a meeting. We're not calling board members out on another evening. In addition to, it's really an hour prior to, and it really allow us an opportunity to target and talk about and discuss or have some presentations made with regard to those. One of the things we really need to move forward with is a real structured policy review. And really engage going through all of our policies and having reviews of those, edits of those, some subtractions of those, but really start that, and this would allow a policy committee to do that our facilities. We have a lot of things to talk about with the board when it comes to our facilities, considerations that we'd want to make, any updates that we want to give to the board. In that, certainly with finance, you saw we just hosted a month ago a financial meeting. We could be doing that on a more regular basis, but in a shorter time period, and really allowing the board to interact with one or two things that are on their minds with regard as we build a budget throughout the year. In addition to, calling any longer special meetings that we would require for those. And likewise with our other committees as well. So I've seen that work well in other school districts. It's engaging. It's prior to a night that the board is already here. But there's a time limit to that so that it really captures and forces the board to think critically, making really important decisions and commentary and engaging in conversations for an hour prior to the regularly scheduled meetings. And then our community would also see that we've regularly scheduled those committee meetings and they could join as well. So that's just a possibility and recommendation. If the board has other thoughts or feelings about how they would like to structure, I think there's certainly enough involved in the world of our school district here that we certainly should really consider running some structured committee meetings throughout the course of a year.
So personally, like after reading the whole thing, it sounds very much like what you said is already here, with the exception of that this is already, that it's not built into our schedule right now.
Yeah, currently the district's not calendared committee meetings. This would essentially be calendaring those. So typically, I would assume, and probably about in a month's time, the board would consider a board committee structure for next year and list those dates. At the same time, the board could also list out those committees when they would meet, and then if that structure would work, they could be calendared then. We could post those, we could advertise those, our community would know about those, you would know about those, and we would be able to move forward once the policies changed and we go through a second read, that we could begin those. Ultimately, we could begin those with the start of the 25-26 school year. And it would really be helpful for us as administration as well. There are just so many things, and sometimes extending regular meetings longer and pushing out 3.5 hour meetings to do all the needed presentations and so forth, they become less productive as well for captured time periods. So something to consider. I don't think there's a lot that would need to be changed with regard to the policy. And I did talk to Mr. Sultanic a little bit about this, and once we had some discussion, I'd bring back any thoughts and ideas to be able to add the necessary wording to whatever structure the board would want to consider.
Yeah, so when Mrs. Scott and I had discussions with you, you had pointed out, there's some policies that haven't even been looked at for over 15 years. So I know it's a ton of pages to read, but I think just making sure that we are legally updated, and if there are things that need to be brought, they get brought. And this way we're setting in, nothing's done behind scenes, everything's out in front. We can all discuss it and hopefully come to a situation where we can all agree on something and move forward. But there's some stuff in there, like I said, that's never been in there. It hasn't been read in 10, 15 years, or it said it was, and I don't remember going over it. But we definitely need, as a group, to come together to get this stuff fixed, because it'll just make our wheels run smoother.
So one of the other things that I think was not a good thing was that we did meet ahead of time, but we do have to have that agenda-setting meeting. We didn't really discuss what we were going to discuss, except that needs to be, I feel that needs to be part of it, that we would just meet, that those that are on the, and sometimes you have to meet with, like, facilities would have to meet with, you know, our head of facilities and that sort of thing. So you have to set the agenda for the meeting. It makes it easier for everyone that comes, can be prepared as to what's going to be discussed. But we're not changing any policy, we're just bringing it here. We're not doing anything with facilities, we're just highlighting what's going on. So you do need that pre-meeting to come then to this public meeting.
Yeah, that's important. It's important in terms of structuring the meeting agenda and preparing that. The business of the school district needs to be done here, right? It's done in public, setting of the agendas, and we do that now in bringing an agenda out to the public then and setting that and making that public. So it's a similar structure as you see tonight. Our special meeting structure is that same way. It follows the policies that are there, and we can easily do that. Ms. Diamond, you had a question?
Yeah, as far as I know, we are still having PSBA do our policies, is that correct?
PSBA is doing the policies.
Yes. So
So I find it ironic that Mr. Sawada's sitting over there and saying 15 years since they've been touched, because we're paying the PSBA to do them yearly.
So you're in a structure right now where we get those that may be modified, might be changed based on law. What has not been frequently happening is that the policies have not been coming forward here. And that needs to be a structure that takes place. There are so many of those. We can't do those in our regular meeting. We need to start out with a committee to be able to run through and focus those on. A traditional committee meeting might bring forward 10 different types of policies, and we can go through those during that time period to be able to make decisions on those so that we can then bring them to a committee meeting for any open discussion outside of that. That structure has not been happening to date. So we do have some outdated policies if you look through our policies.
And then I just heard Mrs. Scott say that her and Mr. Sawada apparently met with you on policy.
Yeah, they
And I
can.
thought we were not supposed to be doing that anymore, because when I was on a committee, Mrs. Scott threw up a thing, you can't meet with somebody like that. You have to have everybody there.
So what's allowable to do is for a board member or board members, certainly not 5, to come in and to meet, to set an agenda. They did come in, we met for 20 minutes, a half hour, to set some agenda items for this evening of what are the 2 policies they wanted to be spoken about in this special meeting. The decision was made to bring those forward of 815.1. I made some recommendations about 006, and the agenda was set with regards to that. So that's an appropriate use of how we can set an agenda so we can bring forward to committee meetings and then share those in those same committee meetings. And that's the structure that I'm proposing that we utilize.
Does anyone have anything to add or discuss? No?
So,
Mr. Earl?
Mr. Earl?
Just want to make sure I understand this properly. We're still going to have committee chairs and committees of the whole?
So you have a structured meeting right now that's called a committee of the whole meeting, right? That's a
Right.
regularly scheduled meeting.
Yeah.
And you have a regularly scheduled legislative meeting that falls 2 weeks later. So committee chairs are utilized in the way to be able to set an agenda for committee meetings. What you're not doing right now is you're not hosting committee meetings.
Correct.
I'm proposing that we structure and post a calendar like we do for our regular meetings, both the committee of the whole meeting and the legislative meeting, and calendar those so that we can utilize committee chairs to help set the agenda, to run a committee meeting, and that we have regular committee meetings structured on the same evenings that we have our 2 regularly scheduled meetings.
I thought
Occurring.
the solicitor said if we have committee of the whole, you wouldn't have committee chairs. It'd be committee of the whole.
Well, your committee of the whole right now, and we're trying to shift most of the things away from voting in a committee of the whole meeting. A committee of the whole meeting is really meant to be an informational meeting,
Right.
similar to tonight, right? It's meant to be an informational meeting. It's meant to go through all the similar components to share with the board so that you have then a couple of weeks to think about what was, to hear from your constituent
Correct.
groups, and then the legislative meeting to do that. What we can't get accomplished in those two meetings are all the other things related to the committees that we don't have running right now. It would help to expedite our review of policy. It would help to expedite a number of things that we could then bring back from finance, from facilities, from education, to be able to have those board representatives at the committee of the whole or at the legislative meeting to be able to report out. Certainly other board members are welcome to attend those committee meetings to be able to be ears and to be listening to the presentations and so forth. Or we're streaming now, so those can be done, at their leisure. So that's the structure that I'm suggesting so that we can get more of the business of the school completed, some of which is necessary, most especially just when we're talking about policy, but related to a lot of our policies right now. But there are many other things in other areas that we need to be discussing, and it gives us another opportunity to do that. You're welcome. So I will speak with Mr. Sultanic about the language that currently exists related to committee meetings and some of the things we discussed this evening. Similar to 815.1, I'll bring back at the committee of the whole meeting some language, a draft of that, and for further discussion, and if so, and the board chooses to move forward to the legislative meeting for a first read of what that change could possibly be. Okay, that takes us to almost kind of the second half of the meeting this evening, and this is a facilities update. And we have two updates to bring to you this evening. One, and both are going to be presented, first introduced by Mr. Scheel, our Director of Facilities, but presented by Dewey Engineering /CHA, and I do see those individuals here this evening. So both an update on the turf field considerations and our Boyertown Elementary School HVAC and roof study presentation as well. So, Mr. Scheel, I'm going to have you introduce and invite our guests up here.
Good evening. The district reached out to Dewey for both of these projects to get their expertise and design work. First, we're going to start with the turf field. Currently, the permits are out. We're waiting for those to get back. We're about halfway through our contract with Dewey. So it's a good time for an update. I want to make sure the board knows everything that's going into the bid before it hits the street, which includes what the base bid is, what the alternates are, and what they look like. Dewey will explain those tonight. As far with Boyertown L, we've reached out to Dewey to give us their recommendation on the best way to improve the HVAC system, roofing, and in turn, the electrical and some life safety equipment. They will be presenting that as well. That will be their recommendation. So the board will have to make a decision going forward, along with the administration, on which direction we want to go with that. As far as the turf, it's informational. The bids, they're getting the bid documents completed. And then once the permits come back and we know that we're good to go, they will hit the street. So without any more words from me, I'd like to introduce the Dewey representatives so they can come up and do the presentation. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the board and the administration and the Boyertown School District public. My name is Jamie Lynch. I'm the business practice leader for what is now CHA. We were with you in the fall to talk about both the turf and the HVAC at the elementary school, and our same team is with you this evening. I just wanted to reintroduce myself. We've been now a part of CHA for about a year. We're still the same group that's based in Bethlehem, working really 90% of our work is for K-12 school districts, still in eastern Pennsylvania, providing PM, CM work, mechanical, electrical, plumbing design, and also structural engineering. So it's hard to believe that it's been about a year that we've been under the CHA umbrella, but it's been very good for us, and we remain really unchanged in the service that we provide. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about that afterwards, but in the meantime, I'm just the warm-up show for Chris Holler, your project manager, who will talk to you about both the turf project and the elementary. And then Kevin Burns is our mechanical engineer, who's worked with Chris and I on putting the study and all the information together. So if there are any questions, you've got all the experts this evening at your disposal.
Hi, everyone. I will try to keep this brief. I'll go through the 78 slides I have as quickly as possible. I'm kidding, it's not 78. So I do want to present to you both the turf update and the Boyertown Elementary School update. So without further ado, if we could go to the next slide. Oh, I got the click. I can do that. There we go. So this is a design of the stadium field. You can see the logo in the center. The end zones will have the Bears name on it. I'll go through the stuff that is included in this as a base bid design, but all the shaded areas that you see will be turf. So in the D area to the left, past the end zone, you currently have the shot put and the discus throw in there. Those two items will be moved to another area on campus so that that area can be turf as well. Next, we're looking at Field 1. You see the logo in here. That will be an alternate bid, and I'll get into the alternates a little bit later on as well. This field here is actually designed where there's fencing around it to protect it from any vehicles or anything like that being able to drive on it. To the left of it, you can see a little bit of a walkway there. One of the requirements that we have to do is there's ADA parking associated with this field, and we need to provide an accessible walking path from that parking lot or parking spaces over to the concrete pad where the district can place bleachers if they so choose. So what's included in the bids? Both fields are considered base bid. So with the stadium field, we'll have lining for football, soccer, field hockey, boys and girls lacrosse. We're looking at a two-tone turf field, and basically that's two different shades of green, just ever so slightly. So it looks like your lawn when it's freshly mowed. When you look at it from the bleachers, you'll see a dark 5 yard section, then a lighter green 5 yard section. And it just gives the appearance of being mowed. There's no additional cost to do the two different color turfs. So we thought that's something that really highlights the field in the stadium. Netting at both ends of the field to protect soccer balls, field hockey balls, footballs from going past the field. That netting will be removable, so it's not in the way of anything when you're using it for track and field events. New flagpole. As I mentioned, we're going to relocate the shot put and discus, and a new underdrain system, as well as stormwater management. That will be under the field as well. For Field 1, it'll have all the same lines, less football. It'll also have the fencing and the netting, a concrete pad for owner-provided bleachers, the accessible walking path, and again, underdrain system and stormwater management on that field as well. So this is a little difficult to read, but I will go through the alternate bids. So alternate bid 1 is to consider the earthwork unclassified. Now what that means is the base bid is the dirt will be classified, which means that if contractors run into unsuitable soils, rocks, anything like that, we have measurements within the specifications that dictate what the contractor owns and what is outside of their contract. If we come across stuff that's outside of their contract, we measure it, and then there's we pay for it through allowances or change order if needed. We asked the contractor to give us a price to deem that material unclassified. And what that means is, they say for $25,000, we'll take the risk and deem everything unclassified. Unclassified means whatever they find, they own. For $25,000, that's certainly a very good risk for the school district, where you take that alternate and say, okay, you find it, it's yours. If they came back and said it was $200,000, not so much a good alternate to take. You, at that point, the district would take the risk, I think, and say, if you find something extra beyond what's in contract, we'll pay you for it. So it really comes down to on bid day what that number is, but basically classified, we own anything beyond the specs. Unclassified, they own it all. Number 2 was to do what's called a Brock fill on the fields. That is more of a wood grain fill in lieu of the rubber and sand, and it's something that's deemed more environmentally friendly. So we want to get a price for that, so on bid day, the school district can make a determination on if that's something that's of value to them. Alternate number 3, typically you get an 8-year warranty with the turf field. We're asking them to give us a price to make it a 10-year warranty. You get 2 extra years warranty out of that. Alternate number 4 is the logo at the center of Field 1. I have it as an ad. We can certainly make it a deduct if you want to. But the soccer field would not have the logo, and then this is an ad to add that logo to the center of the soccer field. And the purpose for that is, I think, you're using that for soccer field, hockey, and everything. It just gives the students and the athletes and the parents that come to watch the games just a sense of pride that, that logo's there. But see what the price is on bid day, and we can make a determination. And then alternate number 5A, I have 5A, B, C, and D. 5A is to deduct field number 1 from the bid package. So we'll get a number from the contractors and say, this is how much you'll save if you don't do field 1. And then alternate numbers 5B, 5C, and 5D really mimic the first 3 bids, but it's just for the stadium. So if we're not doing field 1, we want to take out the price to deem the site unclassified. So we just want unclassified for the stadium. We would just want the warranty for the stadium, or we would just want the Brock fill for the stadium. So that's what those alternates are, should you choose to not do 5A. So if you select 5A, you would be selecting 5B, 5C, and 5D as well, because you're just taking everything that has anything to do with Field 1 out of the bid package at that point. Did I explain that okay? Great. So looking at the prices, this hasn't changed from what was submitted before. You have your base bid and soft costs, so it's a total package of about $7.2 million, including escalation for the summer of 26. We're looking at about $7.5 million. We have a deduct alternate for the Field 1. That's a ballpark 2.5 to maybe 3, depending on what the contractors do. So that's a range right now. So without Field 1, we're looking at about $5 million, $4.5 to $5 million to do the stadium field. And then looking at the schedule. Oops, sorry. Started design in December. Right now we have everything submitted to the Berks County Conservation District and to the municipality, so we are working through the approval process to get permits. I would anticipate bidding September, October-ish once we know we have permits and we're good to go. Don't recommend going to bid before we have permits, because if there's something that needs to be added through the approval process, we don't want to deal with those things after you have contracts. Plus, we can't do any work without permits. So it's just good practice to wait until we have permits to go out for bid, so we can make sure everything's included in the bid appropriately. That would give the contractors time to start procuring materials. And then I have on the schedule here April through September for doing the work. Obviously, we don't need that much time to do turf fields, but I have that in there because I want to work with your facilities group, your administration, and your athletic department to make sure we're not impacting spring and summer activities on those two fields. Thinking through this, if field one stays in the project, we could obviously start with field one. We could start redoing the work for the shot put and the discus areas and the other area that we're looking at with the school district. And then once the track and field events for the spring are completed, we could move into the stadium and do that work. So we're working through that. Again, we'll make sure everything's coordinated with your administration, athletic, and facilities to minimize that impact as much as we can. Any questions on the turf? Go ahead.
Yes, I have lots of them. First of all, field one, which is behind that home, which has been a nightmare for those people that live there, and not having proper netting. And there was supposed to be proper netting from beforehand, and yet they're getting all kinds of field hockey balls all over their yard, hitting their homes. It's not safe for them to be out in the yard. So what are we going to do there?
So netting at that field is included.
Netting is going to be properly done this time, not like the last time.
I don't know what was decided last time, so.
What? They didn't do the work last time. I didn't say they did. I didn't say they did, but I want to make sure that that netting is going to be proper this time.
If I
Those
recall,
poor people cannot be out in their yard.
if I recall,
That is ridiculous.
if I recall correctly, it's either 20 or 30 feet high behind the goals, and it wraps around the sides a little bit. So if there's something that might shoot off to the side, that's also captured. I don't remember if it's 20 or 30 feet high, but it's high.
And it has to be expanding enough around their homes that they don't get hit anymore.
Well, like I said, it goes across the back of the field where the goals are, and then it also wraps up both sides of the field. It doesn't wrap the entire field, but both end zones. I call them end zones. There's not football, but.
Have you been down there and looked at that house?
I haven't looked at the house, but I've been down there, yes. And that's why we're adding the netting, to address that thing.
Because we were supposed to have netting before, and unfortunately, somebody said they ran out of funds and it never got finished.
Well, netting is included in the
And
bid.
Mr. Shield, you know what I'm talking about, because we've been down there.
Netting is included in the bid.
Okay, where's the cost of the equipment to maintain the fields?
So that is also included in the base bid. So we have the contractor for the turf manufacturer providing grooming equipment as well. And there's also in the bid that the manufacturer and contractor are to provide impact tests through the length of the warranty and to address whatever needs to be done with the field should something need to be done to make sure that impact testing is properly addressed.
I didn't see anything in here mentioned that equipment that we need to maintain it is included.
It wasn't on the slide, but it's included in the bid.
Well, I need to make sure of that.
Well, I can guarantee you it is.
Where's the cost of the permits?
That's in the soft costs. So soft costs are permits, contingency, fees, things like that.
And cost for the shot put and the discus to be moved and relocated?
That's going to be in the contractor's bid price.
Okay, I don't see it listed either, so that's another question.
So in the base bid of 5.6 million, that's in there. And then on the slide 4, where I list stuff included in the bid under stadium field, I say relocation of shot put and discus throw.
All right, I'm sure I'll have more questions as I go on and do my research. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Should we even consider not doing field one? with all the sports we want to play, I don't want to see us put a field out there and half the kids can't play on it. Did you talk to the athletic director about that? How much he would need? Would he need the 2 fields?
We've had conversations with the administration, athletic department, and the facilities department. So again, making that an alternate bid, that's something that the school district can decide on bid day if that's a value that they.
Well, that didn't answer my question, but.
Well, whether it should be part of the bid or not is not
No,
for
but
me
I'm
to direct,
talking
but-
about the usage. I don't want to put a field in for a couple $1 million and then half the children can't play.
Mr. Palladino, can you speak to that just a little bit to try to answer that question for Mrs. Gerald?
When option number 1 is for both fields. If you're asking me, the athletic department, our recommendation, it would be to have the stadium and field number 1 both done. That will give us the most opportunity for all of our students to be on there at the same time. Will it be more difficult if we only have 1 field? It'll be very difficult if we only have 1 field. But we were asked to give number of options to the board. So that's what we're just bringing everything forward for then the board to make the decision on, given our recommendation on what we're going to do.
Did you just say option 1 is for both fields?
That's the actual, is it the base? That's base bid is for field 1 and the stadium both together. And then he talked about a deduct, like deducting
Okay,
field 1,
yeah.
then that would be the cost of if we took that one away.
Well, if you take that one away, is that going to influence Title IX?
It'll be more of, we will make it so it's all equitable, but it'll be extremely difficult for everybody to get on there when they need to get on there.
So that being the case, why are we even putting it in there as an alternate?
Yeah.
Because we were
We
asked,
just kidding ourselves?
we were just asked last year to just bring everything forward. We wanted to be just bring it all forward to say, I didn't want to say I'm hiding something from you. So that's the only
No,
reason.
we're not saying that, but let's be real about this stuff.
No, that's why on the base bid
Put
we
the cards
asked,
out. We're going to have both fields.
we asked for the base bid to be both fields because that's my recommendation
Thank
is for
you.
both.
Yeah, do you have anything in mind on the manufacturer for the fields? Is there somebody that,
Yes, so we did speak with, again, your athletic department and your facilities department, the 2 that will be using it and maintaining it. We have, I believe, four manufacturers listed. Who they are, I don't have off the top of my head. I might be able to name 2 or 3 of them, but I probably don't have all 4 off the top of my head. Do you know that?
It's Field Turf, AstroTurf, Shaw, and Sprint Turf. So they're all listed in the bid, and the contractor will base his bid on whichever vendor he gets good pricing from. But you would know on bid day who your vendor will ultimately be.
and they all 4 of them have the 8 to 10 year, so you're pushing for the 10-year one?
Yes, they do. They all offer, traditionally, as Chris said, an 8-year warranty, and we see what the pricing is commonly to go to 10 years. They're all a comparable turf product as
You
far
should be
as.
over at the mic.
You want me to do that?
Yeah, that'd be good. Thank you.
Mrs. Carroll, can you turn your mic off?
No.
Great, so I'll just repeat for the microphone. At least the 4 vendors are Field Turf, AstroTurf, Sprint Turf, and Shaw. All excellent manufacturers of turf products. They're in all of your neighboring districts here in eastern Pennsylvania, so we have no allegiance to any particular vendor or manufacturer. So it'll be an open, competitive bid process. And you would learn on bid day who the vendor is that the contractor is going to be working with. So that's how we keep it open, competitive, and then let you know, just like the alternates on bid day. Now, go ahead.
Is the subsurf underneath the turf, is that, do you have a standard for that? Not that we get a good top, but then the bottom is different?
Both top and bottom want to be excellent. So
Okay.
the way that the subgrade is constructed is first, on both fields, there's stormwater management. So the stormwater that drains through the turf and hits the under drains and goes into the stormwater system is held in a basin commonly that's underneath the field, and it either holds the water and releases it slowly into the municipal system, or it allows it to infiltrate into the ground. You've got a lot of shale here, so infiltration is probably a little low. Above that basin is the pad on which the turf sits, and it's constructed of a very special stone that is highly draining. So we want everything to go through the turf, through the pad, into the under drains. There's a specification for that stone subgrade, and it's a mix of fine and coarse, and there's actually a specification for the infiltration rate through that stone pad. And what we do during construction is we have the contractor construct a demo of the stone pad and do an infiltration test with a third-party testing agent to prove to everyone involved that the subsurface is meeting the specifications that we create. Does that answer your question?
Yes, the stuff that goes through now, is that going into a retention pond, or are you talking about into the sewer system?
So the stormwater that goes through the turf, through the stone, ends up in a underground stormwater basin, like a retention pond, all right? And it's held there. So we have to hold on to volume and release it at the right rate. And it goes into the municipal stormwater system at the prescribed rate. So that's approved by not only the Soil Conservation District, but your local municipality. And then there's also, like I said, infiltration. So then it infiltrates below the stormwater basin into the ground. And so that's the measure, and that's what's submitted in the municipal and the conservation district permits, how we've calculated the stormwater system for each field.
Thank you.
Okay.
Stay there. I'm sure there's one of those, the material for the turf that's better than another. And maybe you're allowed to tell us that, but you could write to us. I don't want to spend this money and use material that's not up to grade, or that it's like if you buy a Chevy or a Cadillac type thing. I mean, I don't know how else to explain it.
So that's a great question, is the quality of the turf. So what we want to do first is make sure that the surface is safe for athletes. And so that's the primary focus. All of the products that are specified, the manufacturers that I just mentioned, they're meeting the same specification. Chris has worked with your team to understand the blade height, the amount of infill, the backing. And so all of these products, while they all have their own little bells and whistles, are comparable. Now, they're also appropriate for the K-12 environment, for PIAA competition play. We're not over-specifying and providing something that you might see at your SEC college game, nor are we doing something that is just simply putting a rug down on the surface. It's something that's specific to the K-12 environment. The same field that you'll have, you will see it at numerous neighboring districts. And they're tried and true. None of these products will be the first time that you see it installed. You'll know from a neighboring district that has the same product how it performs.
Okay, is there any way we can do a drill test on the ground before we would decide if we wanted to have it unclassified or classified?
So some of that work has been done in the form of the geotechnical investigation for the site. So Field 1, for instance, is underlain with shale. What we know is that we're going to have to rip shale as a part of that project, and shale is considered rippable. It's not considered rock. So we've done some of that work already in order to understand what the nature is of that soil. But we'll see, as Chris mentioned, based on the alternate, that the contractors agree with what we've seen. And so you'll know on bid day what they think of how hard that shale is.
Okay, and then I was looking, but I would rather just do the two fields. But I was looking at the alternate, if we took out Field 1, 2.5 million, but we're still having $1.6 million in soft costs. I think that's a lot if you only do the one field. I mean, how do you justify $4,000.
You got that one?
$4,500,000 for the cost and still have the soft cost of 1.6 million.
Well, again, that soft cost is a very broad brush. It includes the permitting process.
Right.
So right now, we're permitting for 2 fields.
Well, we got a lot of permits already, didn't we?
We're in the process of getting the municipality and the Berks County Conservation District. It includes the fees for design. You're designing 2 fields. So a lot of the soft costs involved are tied to both fields.
Okay, so you're not doing a separate cost to design. That's all getting thrown in the soft cost?
Our design fee is to do 2 fields. So yeah, we're designing 2 fields for you. Come bid day, if you choose to not build field 1, we've still done the design work on that.
That's what I mean.
So.
To me, it's silly to even consider not doing it. Because you're just blowing money that you're taking, the district is taking a gamble. Are we gonna do it or aren't we? So we're spending all this money. Why would you do that if you're not gonna get both fields done? I'm not asking you, I'm just making a statement. But, okay, thank you.
Yep.
I would like to see 2 fields, but my understanding was that if we were only going to do 1, that the priority would be field 1 and not the stadium.
That's
Yeah.
that's the athletic department's recommendation.
And we talked about that as administration. Nick can speak a little bit more to it, most of which is the accessibility pieces that the stadium offers, and the ability to host everything there, along with a lot of the ADA compliances that already exist, the restrooms that exist, the services and things of that nature that exist there to be able to offer that playing surface for all, and as well as, thank you, as well as already existing lighting. So it makes a longer time period to be able to both practice and compete. When we looked at scheduling and how many sports could take place from 3 o'clock to essentially 10 o'clock in the evening, comparable to, we start to lose that light in later October and we really start to run into where that existence, yeah. So, I don't know, Mr. Palladino, do you have anything to add to that?
Another reason we decided not to go with field 1 as the primary, if we decided to put lights down there, now that brings up a whole different animal for a game management standpoint, where now we have to do additional fencing. We have to fence not just the field in, but the area of spectators, because with the new lights, when they put the new lights up, the spill rate is extremely low. So it's, your field is lit and then it's almost a wall of black outside of that. You can't really see too much out of it, and it would be a game management nightmare to have 500 people down there and you don't know where they're at. Are they going on other people's properties? Are they running around on other fields? Are they running in retention basins? We have porta potties down there that you wouldn't be able to see in. There's not additional lighting down there. So not like Memorial Stadium is fenced in, Bear Stadium is fenced in, Softball Stadium is fenced in. Everybody, when they come to a game, they're in that area. With an open field, we don't have that. So we looked at, to be able to do all that, now we're building, instead of just a field, we're building a mini stadium. So we chose to use what we already had and make the Memorial Stadium option 1, because we can get more out of it, because we already have a lot of those facilities down there.
Yeah, it'll probably come back to you.
Okay.
Okay, you said about lighting and that for field 1. Are we doing any lighting down there?
No.
No light. Are we doing a parking lot down there?
An additional parking lot? No.
What about handicapped accessible for those people that want to go there?
There is that, I can speak on, between the end line of field 1 and Bear Stadium, there is an ADA parking lot there, and that's where on the one end of the drawing he showed there was a walking path, an ADA accessible path going from that lot up into the area where spectators would sit at field 1.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Palladino, I would imagine you've kept in touch too with the band.
Yep.
So this all handle the band stuff because of the cavalcade and
Yes,
the amount of-
if we only had say, field number 1 done, we didn't choose to put football lines on that field because there's a lot of lines on there already. And if they want to host cavalcade, they need to do it in the stadium because of the seating. It wouldn't be, even if we had football lines down on field 1, it wouldn't work out very well for them because there's not enough spectator seating for a big event like that. So we chose to do it, put it up in the stadium. That way they're part of the mix. They're on the schedule. It's accessible not only to my athletic department, but to all of our students who are involved in any activity.
So my question is about the Brock fill. That's the more organic, healthier version, right, of what goes into the turf field, the Brock fill?
Correct.
And that would cost more, though, opposed to the bid that we have?
What
Or
we see
possibly?
as far as estimating, yes, it's an increase in cost.
'Cause I could-
But we would want to see what that number is on bid day, and if it's something reasonable and it's something the board would want to pursue, certainly it's your right.
Because I couldn't imagine doing it without that. Everyone seems to be a bit concerned about, the toxicity, whether it's proven or not or whatever. I can agree that if we have a safer alternative, we should probably go with that alternative.
And I want to thank you for mentioning the band. Everybody forgets about the band. I did.
Where are you going to put the shot put and discus throw field or space or whatever it's called?
So if you could help me with the field names. It's down across from field 1, across the road from field 1.
We can check that out after the meeting.
If you're in the softball stadium, above right field, there's a field right above it. We call it field number 6. It's like a practice lacrosse field. The shot put, discus, and javelin areas are going to move up there. The reason we chose that area is because it was the closest to the stadium. So for practices and meets, it's not that far of a walk for those people who are in those events. The other area would have been down here behind Bear Stadium, but we're looking at triple the distance for the kids. And I felt with coaches and kids going down there would be times when you wouldn't be able to see them. So we want them up on that area. Plus that field dries nice. It's an open area. We can throw javelin on it. We can fit the discus cages and the shot put area all up there.
So what are we losing using that for that?
The only thing we'd really be losing is some corner space because of where they're going to put the shot put and the discus. They have to put concrete pads down. Javelin is just lines on the ground. They're just paying.
What was on that field before?
It was just a practice field for lacrosse. It was an additional practice field. We have a game field and a practice field.
It could continue as a practice field.
It could still be used as a practice field, just not when they're out throwing discus or javelin.
So you intend to still use it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and it might come back to you again. On the bid that I looked at over the weekend, before we got this one tonight, it said about a practice field, and it was the same price as here, and now I notice the practice field's not on here.
The same. We call it field 1 now. So that field 1 is what was looked at as far as practice field. So it's field 1.
And I think field 1 was on here too, but I'm not sure. I left my copy of that at home, sorry.
They're one and the same. So it's field 1 and stadium is where the work occurs.
Ms. Nyman, are you referring to that smaller third field?
Yeah.
That was on something, I believe that was always just a suggestion and was never really quite a part of it.
It was on here, and it was the same amount.
Yeah, I think there was the two words were used interchangeably, and was something that we asked CHA to change with regard to that, because I saw that in there as well. So the practice field and field 1 were kind of used interchangeably. We're identifying it as field 1, so that stadium is the one field, field 1 is the other.
I'll look at that when I go home.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm just wondering, why do we need to have that one back end zone turfed to even bother to move the shot put?
So it comes down to maintenance and use of the field with the runoff. Now, the other D area is already rubber. It matches the running track. So we're not looking at changing that one, but the one on the other end of the field with runoff with the end zone and maintenance for the facilities department is just easier to deal with if it's turf. You're not running lawn mowers across to mow a small area.
And oftentimes, I've been witness to this when you have those situations. We've seen where grass clippings and seedlings and so forth, they actually then start to grow in the track. So we do get, you have those complications to it.
On this picture, you have the gray area as turf. The white area on the picture is what?
So in the stadium, that white area is the same material as your running track. I called it rubber.
Okay.
But there's white down here at the one end.
That's what he's talking about. That's gonna be the same material as a running track?
It already is.
It's a,
It already is.
yeah, okay.
All right. So with that, we shall move on to the elementary school. That wasn't hard. But that's not a challenge either. All right, so what I'm presenting tonight is really a refresher, a reminder of what we talked about last time, and then with along with recommendations on how to proceed with Boyertown Elementary School. So if you remember, we looked at basically 4 different options. We did have a fifth being just maintain what you already have. So option 1 and option 2, we're looking at VRFs with DOAS. So that's a variable refrigerant flow. So what you see on the roof to the right is that unit that provides a heat source to what are called ceiling cassettes. And then the unit that's on the left part of the roof is a DOAS unit, and that provides fresh air and humidification. So one option of this system was to go all electric. Option 2 was basically the same design, but for the DOAS unit, we would be looking at going with gas versus electric for your fuel source. Option 3 was looking at a 4-pipe VAV system with a central heating and cooling plant. To do this one, you would really want to consider doing the entire building. Not something we think is really needed. It's not our recommendation because you have equipment in this building that's less than 5 years old. So we really don't want to replace equipment that's new. And then option 4 was to go with a packaged unit ventilator. It would operate similarly to what you have in your classrooms now. And then option 5, again, what we looked at was just continue to repair the units you have. The problem with that is the age of them and parts are becoming very difficult to find. Also, the refrigerant is becoming difficult to deal with as well because that's being upgraded consistently. With the elementary school, when we came in here last time, we were asked to consider looking at an expanded scope when we first went in, so we started looking at the big box spaces. So we're looking at upgrading the heat pump in the multipurpose room, upgrading the heating ventilation unit for the locker room, dealing with the library, mechanical room, upgrading or replacing, I should say, the makeup air unit in the kitchen. And then also with this equipment is new ATC controls, automatic temperature controls. And then insulating some of the supply duct, and that's scheduled to remain in the multipurpose room. Along with that, we looked at some electrical system items. Now, if you remember when we first came in, we talked about the generator and the transformer. Those were included in the estimate with the first go-around. So now we're looking at upgrading some of the panels and the feeders in the building. That would be for the entire building. And we're also looking at life safety and upgrading the fire alarm system within the school. Again, just some pictures of the switchboard. These would be replaced. The generator, again, would be replaced. We'd bring in one that's sized larger, and the generator would go outside. So looking at what would be recommended for this elementary school would be the VRF with DOAS with a natural gas feed. We think that is your best energy savings. What we would recommend is the gas feed that comes to the school. We would work with your facilities department and size that appropriately for future needs in the school. Whether that's the water heater, whether that's kitchen equipment, whatever the facilities department says, down the road, we would like this to be gas and no longer electric. So that feed to the building would be sized, and then you could actually do that work and have the proper service to the building for future needs. Looking at the roof, again, we looked at 4 systems here. I'm sorry. I was looking at the slide, not looking at my audience.
What about the kitchen now? You said about possibly upgrading that. What's our life expectancy there now? Do we have it 5 years, 10 years?
Our kitchen's electric now. We just sized the gas that if we would go to gas appliances, which we don't use in this. What he's referring to is we would switch off from electric to gas appliances. Currently, we don't really use a lot of gas appliances in any of our kitchens, but we would still size it so that if we would, you'd have the ability to tie on in the future if, different food preparation would be done in-house versus what we currently use.
Okay, what is the lifespan of what we have there now? Do we have it there like 10 years and we expect it to go another 10?
The kitchen equipment, it's a mismatch of a bunch of different years. I know the dishwasher there is probably 4 years old. Ovens, we don't use them very often. I don't really know the original buy date. The steamer's old, but that's electric. So, and I don't know that we'd switch that to gas.
Thank you.
Yep.
And again, bringing that gas feed to the building, I don't think the price would change that much if you increase the size of the line from 1.5 inches to 2 inches or something like that. We just want to make sure that if we're bringing natural gas to the building, we want to be proactive and make sure that we think of everything that could possibly be on natural gas should you ever do the work in the future.
I just want to know what the lifespan was there already.
Yes.
Natural gas versus propane. You can't use propane?
You can use propane. Typically, we'll do that when natural gas is not available to the school. There is natural gas in the street right in front of the school.
I like propane better. The other thing is, what's wrong with the fire alarm system that we have?
The fire alarm system is inspected and operational, but it is out of date, as in most of our elementary schools. So
What does that mean, out of date?
out of date means that it should have been replaced probably 10 years ago, according to code. If you want to follow strict code, every classroom should have an annunciator and a strobe, which we currently don't have in any of our elementaries, but we are looking at pricing to update our elementaries to include those life safety features. So the system was put in, I believe, in the 90s, and they don't service the parts anymore. So if something goes, like your power supply or one of the cards or even a board, you can't get the parts. And then we're in an emergency situation instead of a let's update it and do it in a timely manner. So we don't run into emergency.
I don't know many things that don't have aftermarket parts, but that's okay. Thank you.
Simplex is one that does not. They are proprietary based, and most fire alarm systems are.
And also, we would be looking at updating the fire alarm system to tie in the mechanical equipment.
Thank you.
Okay, roofs. Here we were looking at 4 different options, a TPO, an EPDM. Both of those are a single ply roof. Then we have built up roof for mineral surface and flood coat and gravel. Both of those are 2-3 layers of roofing, and just the surface is different between the two. Again, we have some pictures of what the different roofing systems look like. Go through those quickly here. So the recommendation, working with your facilities department, was to go with a TPO roof. Our recommendation is to do TPO, but bid EPDM as an alternate bid. It doesn't involve more design or anything, and it really keeps both manufacturers honest with their numbers if they know there's competition. We always want to make sure we build competition into the specs as best we can to get you the best price and the best value for your schools. So putting all this together, the HVAC and electrical systems are roughly $7.3 million. The roofing system is roughly $5.1. Now, I do want to remind everyone that we do have $1.2 million within that roofing number to address the mansard roof. I don't think we'll need all that, but I wanted to make sure that a budget that we present to you was all inclusive as best as we could. So you had a question, so I'll stop.
Could we know what it would be? You're only bidding out a 20-year warranty?
We could do an alternate bid
we
to do
know
a
an offer for
25-year
30?
warranty or a 30-year warranty.
If we're
We'll-
spending that much money, how much more
absolutely.
is it going to
Do
cost?
the same
for-
thing we did with the turf field.
Thank you.
Yep. So the subtotal between those two systems is roughly $12.5 million. Soft cost is just under 2. We do have escalation in here because for this building, it's almost 100,000 square feet. And to do this work in the summer, I'm hesitant to try and get that much work done in a span of 2.5-3 months. So we're looking at splitting that up between the summer of 26 and the summer of 27, so we don't impact the functioning of what school's supposed to do. So the total estimate all included is about $15.2 million. And then as I mentioned with the schedule, if the board so chooses at their March meeting to move forward with this, we would start the design, bid September, October, around the same time we would be doing the turf bids, approve things in November. That gives the contractors December through June to start procuring materials and equipment, and then separate the work into the 2 summers there. So next steps, again, we're looking at, once we have permits and everything, we would come back to the board for your authorization to proceed with the bid packages. You'd have the numbers in front of you. We're coordinating the timing of the construction phase with the administration, facilities, and athletic department. And then with the Boyertown Elementary School, if the board accepts the recommendation for the scope for the HVAC and the roof, waiting for your authorization to proceed with the design and bidding of that project. And thank you. I was expecting no questions.
With expansion in the district, and we're going roof, the air conditioning roofs on the roof, we won't be able to go up a floor because we can't go out at Boyertown. We can only go up, but I don't know if that's a roof that we could actually go up on.
It's not just the roof itself. The structure of the building is most likely not designed to accept a second floor. So you would, and I know this because I actually did this for an office building, not a school, but an office building. You would have to go through the existing building to put columns in to support a floor above it, and it would basically be a separate building above the building you have. So it's really not feasible to look at putting a second floor on that one. I do want to say this though. I do recommend doing the HVAC and the roof together. I don't recommend doing one and then 2-3 years later doing the other one, because with the HVAC, there will be new equipment on the roof. So there will be new penetrations through that roof. So I think really you do want to do the HVAC and the roof at the same time.
It's just really sad that it's not gonna be done until 27, because I've been after this for a while now, because of the poor heating and that some kids have been having to wear coats over there. And I pray to God nothing happens over there.
So I think, and we'd have to get into this once we start getting into the design of it, but the classroom mechanical equipment may be able to be done summer 26. The long lead items are really electrical things right now. Switchgear, generators, and I'm sure everybody's paying attention to what's going on across the entire country with the floods in Carolinas, now the floods in Kentucky, and the fires in California. All those things are going to have an impact on lead time for equipment. So I don't want to promise you that we can get the work done in the summer of 26, knowing that those other things outside of this area, which will have a major impact on availability of equipment. Right now, lead times aren't too bad with most of the products. My concern is once they get going, those lead times are going to extend.
But we have another year to go, and it should have been being done this summer, not next year. But unfortunately, the can's been kicked down the road for so long.
Yeah, I guess there's no reality where it could start this summer, right? We get bids quickly and things move along, or no?
It's going to take probably 5-6 months to get the design done. We're going to need to get into the school and really do some inspections. We're going to have to do that when kids aren't in the classrooms, whether that's evenings, weekends, days in service days where there's just teachers there and we can poke around and not interfere with them. So till we try and get things done, we're going to be at summer, and the lead time for even good lead times could be 3 months out. So
Does that mean when you're poking and probing that you might find other things that are wrong and it could be a different price again?
it's an existing building. You always find something. We have contingency built into that estimate. So there's contingency built into the estimate to try and plan for the things that we just couldn't think of without opening up every ceiling or looking behind every wall.
So contingency could be even higher, possibly.
It's always possible, but again, we try to plan for that. We planned an inflationary number. We plan to have design contingency for the things that we just don't know right now because we didn't dive into the weeds on the design. And that's all in the soft cost.
Well, I want to thank CHA for their presentation and discussion this evening, and Mr. Scheel as well. Just to close this out, a couple of things to consider. What we'll ask CHA to do is come back once the bid packages are complete with the fields, once the permits have all been issued, just to explain all the things that have occurred in terms of those permits and alike. And just to go back and either confirm the schedule that they have presented this evening with regard to that prior to the bid process. For Boyertown Elementary, one of the things the board will need to consider to have CHA move forward with the design phase, if you so choose to move forward with the recommendations this evening, would be to enter into a contract with regard to that. I believe, Mr. Scheel, you've received that contract. We could present that contract to you as a board at the committee of the whole meeting for you to review that contract thoroughly, speak to that. We'd certainly have Mr. Sultanic and his team also review that for your then final consideration in March at the legislative meeting. In doing so and approving that would allow then CHA to move forward, like they said, with probably 4 to 5 months of of design phases to kick that project off. So just some things to consider as we wrap these presentations up. Mr. Updegrove?
Yeah, I have one more question. On the elementary school, you're going to use a bunch of different subcontractors on that project?
So we would have, I think, a minimum of 2, maybe 3 prime contractors. We'd have a roofing contractor, we'd have an HVAC contractor, and we'd probably have an electrical contractor as prime contracts. Those prime contracts may have subcontractors with them, but those 3 contracts would have direct contracts with the school district.
Are they reputable contractors then? Do you have, I mean, are there bonds?
We
that they
have
to
bond
get?
requirements. I think we require A+ ratings on them. They have to fill out a contractor questionnaire so we know their financials. But yes, historically, when we're involved, I don't want to brag, but historically when we're involved, we get good contractors bidding it because they know how we work.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Public comment period number 2, Ms. Savage.
Hi again. I wasn't sure what you were going to talk about with policy 06, but I was very happy to hear the conversation about the committees. What was proposed is very similar to what has happened, the way they've operated up until about 6 years ago. About a year ago, I did speak with Mr. Panarello, gave him that historical perspective. I actually put together an email describing how the committees did work. And I'll dig that up and share that with you guys. But in a nutshell, each committee had a chair or a co-chair, as you do, and they were assigned an administrative liaison. And it was the role of the committee chair or co-chairs to work with that liaison to develop agendas and the calendar. And I think the one thing we did a little differently than the way you described it, Dr. David Heiser, was those teams determined when the key times that they were expected to need meetings based on what was going on, like the review of the program of studies for curriculum, for example, rather than just being 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. But I think any of that would work, and I think all of that would be an improvement. So thank you very much for that conversation.
Board comment, Mr. Updegrove.
Yeah, I made a comment that I was having a meeting the following week after this meeting up there at the BCTC, and that meeting was canceled. It'll be at the end of the month, and I'll have a report after that, but it would be for March then.
Okay. Ms. Nyman?
Yeah, I do have a question in regards to the checks. There was one for Weavers for $2,947.42, for ice melt, for rock salt, for 6 of our school buildings. I thought we had, if I'm correct, Mrs. Denicola, an agreement with Coverdale Township on salt.
Mr. Shield can speak to that. My understanding from Mr. Shield is that Colebrookdale did not have salt that they could supply to us, but Mr. Shield could speak to that.
Mr. Shield, can you come to the podium? Mrs. Nyman, can you just repeat that question for Mr. Shield?
I can try.
Okay.
On Weavers for ice melt, rock salt, for 6 of our school buildings, I thought we had an agreement with Coverdale Township to get the salt from them.
We do. We have 2 kinds of salt. We have sidewalk salt, which is what we usually purchase through Weavers, and we have rock salt, which is what we get through the township, which is what we run in our big spreaders around the parking lots. This year has been unprecedented as far as rock salt usage. The township actually cut us off during one of our storms, and it's happening to every district who uses township salt. Every manager or facility manager I've talked to had the same issue. It's American rock salt ran out basically, and we were actually trying to get barges. We were going to go down and buy it off of a barge. We were lucky we found a landscaper nearby who was able to give us 22 tons, which is how we've been getting by. So yes, we still do use Cobrookdale Township for our rock salt. Sidewalk salt, we buy from Weavers.
Okay, so I guess we used more than what we were expecting to, so are we going to plan differently for next year?
We do not bulk order salt anymore because when we did, it hardened in the bags. So we basically go through the year and see how much we need. And similar to you saw, we ran out, a quarter of the way through winter, so we bought it. It's usually not hard to get. So instead of storing it in our buildings, taking up storage space, plus having the chance that moisture gets in it and we lose bags, we just buy it as we need it instead of buying one giant bulk order, which we really don't save much on rock salt. Yep.
Mr. Earl?
Yeah, it was mentioned a couple meetings back that there was fundraisers going on for the turf by one of our board members. I just wondered how that was going. What kind of money that they have accumulated to this point, if anybody knows.
You can't have a fundraiser without knowing what the cost is. We haven't even agreed yet on doing the fund. What are you laughing at? Okay, so basically it's even the same thing. Yes, you are.
If you'll know it, I'm smiling.
Okay, but there are groups that are being put together. There has been a couple individuals that have wanted to go knock on businesses now. I would not write a check right now because we don't know what the cost is.
Well,
So, but also working with Donna and Maloney and Tracy, there's money and there's significant money for the water flow. So there'll be money coming for that. So you keep saying that, but let me ask you a question. If I said we needed money, Mrs. Deeroff, could you write a check for $100? And you'd ask, well, what's it for? Well, it's for possibly putting an ice hockey rink in. Would you write the check?
Yeah,
Would you? Okay.
for ice hockey.
I got some
would.
good stuff that I want to tell you then.
For ice hockey, I would. You said ice hockey, don't change it. Don't change it now.
Let's move it along, guys.
The other thing, I wanted to ask, some of the schools that I've talked to had put in turf, and they had, I don't know if it was a company or a person or somebody for naming rights, pay for it. Have we looked at any of those sources?
Yes, we've investigated one opportunity, which does not appear that it's able to move forward necessarily quickly at this time.
Okay,
So,
I just wanted to bring it out
yes,
there.
yeah.
And the other thing was, we received an email that there was a conflict with a board member. So my question is, what about the votes that were taken when the board member voted and possibly should have not been voting because of the conflict?
Yeah,
If
and-
that could be looked at?
That would be something we'd have to, you'd want to raise with your solicitor to determine the validity of that. I don't know of any, and speaking with him with regard to that. So it would be something that I think Mr. Panarello would need to raise with Mr. Sultanic to determine if there's any validity to
Thank you.
your question.
I believe we would need to do that to assure there is no conflict, so I would suspect that Mr. Panarello will talk to Mr. Sultanic to find that out, to where we have to go review those. I don't believe there'll be any changes, but we at least need to review them to show that we have done that.
Yeah, easy enough.
Thank you.
Nothing else to add? Mr. Othergrove? I have nothing to add.
Okay, that takes us down to the upcoming meetings. We do have a legislative meeting next Tuesday, the 25th, here at 7 p.m. in the Education Center. And then our Committee of the Whole meeting in March will be hosted at Washington Elementary School. That will be take place at 7 p.m. I do want to make just one other comment. Tomorrow, our strategic planning team meeting. For those invitees, we have about 120 folks that have been invited to come on out. We did change the location of all the meetings. We had a little bit of a scheduling conflict, and we are going to host out of the West Cafeteria. So we've sent communications out. We've posted on social media about that change of location. Thank you to Mrs. Moyer for making sure that we've gotten it out. I wanted to make an announcement this evening, just so who's listening in the public, and also make sure that we send an invitation out again to all the board members. We welcome you to be there tomorrow evening as we start off on our first of 5 meetings for strategic planning. Okay, and it'll begin at 6 o'clock at the Middle School West cafeteria.
Is that where all of the meetings are going to be then?
We're going to shift all 5 to that location. Yeah, we had struggled with the high school with a conflict, and the library wouldn't necessarily be the greatest place for that. We needed a little bit more open space. So we did. Yep. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn?
No, I'm in.
Meeting adjourned.